All right, class. So here we see the cochlea, which is like a snail-like structure, and inside the pink tube-like structure is the cochlear duct. And as I mentioned, the cochlea and the cochlear duct are separated by two canals. Superiorly, we have scala vestibuli, and inferiorly, we have scala tympani. And both scala vestibuli and scala tympani contain perilymph. So let's take a look. So that's the cochlea. Now this is a section. This is a section of the cochlea. You see the cochlea, right? In yellow, this part is the cochlea. All this is cochlea, right? Now inside, if I zoom in, and this part where I'm drawing the triangle, that is the cochlear duct, and this one is scala vestibuli, and this is scala tympani. So those are the two canals. So we see the cochlear duct here, and we also have scala tympani and scala vestibuli inferiorly and superiorly respectively. And remember, within the cochlear duct we have endolymph, and the scala vestibuli and scala tympani has perilymph. And I have shown you a straightened diagram of the cochlea. So this is the real cochlea, how it looks like, but to simplify things I have uncoiled the cochlea and shown you a very straightforward diagram. All right, so another representation, we do see the cochlea, and within the cochlea we see the cochlear duct. So the whole thing is cochlea, and this part is the cochlear duct. We do see scala tympani and scala vestibuli inferiorly and superiorly respectively. Now the base or the inferior side of the cochlear duct has basilar membrane. In this diagram you see the basilar membrane along here. That's the basilar membrane. Sitting on top of the basilar membrane are the hair cells. Can you identify the hair cells? All these are the hair cells. Okay. And then superior to the hair cell, the jello-like material is the tectorial membrane shown here. This is the tectorial membrane, and together all three things, the basilar membrane, the hair cells, and the tectorial membrane, all three things together are shown in a black box, and together they are called the spiral organ. Okay, remember, these hair cells are stimulated by vibration in the endolymph of the cochlear duct. So that's the spiral organ. All right, so another representation, let me see if I can erase this. Okay, so in blue, if you look, just ignore the red marks here. If you look at the blue, that's the basilar membrane. So right here, that's the basilar membrane. Sitting on top of the basilar membrane, we do see the hair cells and the supporting cells. And superior or on top of the hair cells, you have the tectorial membrane, which is a white jello-like material. If you look carefully, the hair cells, they can reach the tectorial membrane, and when they push against the tectorial membrane, the hair cells can bend. Okay. Also, I would like to show you the cochlear branch of cranial nerve 8, or the cochlear branch of vestibulocochlear nerve in yellow. Can you identify that? So you can see the hair cells are associated with the nerve endings, and the axons of these neurons come together to form the cochlear branch of cranial nerve 8. All right. So this is a zoomed in picture of the cochlear duct and the spiral organ. All right, now I tried to draw it out before, but let's do it one more time. We are looking at the auditory pathway, and we will see how the sound waves enter our ear and how actually we hear things. Now, the auditory pathway has two components. We are looking at the sound wave, and then we will see how this wave generate the electrical impulse and how it is perceived by our brain. Okay, so first we will look at the propagation of sound wave. So let's focus on the picture. We do see part on the left hand side, we see the part of the external auditory meatus. We also see the tympanic membrane, and we see the middle ear. If you look at the middle ear, you see three bones, malleus, incus, and stapes. The middle ear is connected to the pharynx by the eustachian tube that moves inferiorly. The middle ear is associated with the inner ear, and the cochlea is kind of uncoiled here, so everything is pretty straightened out. Another thing, if you look at the stapes bone, it does say, if you look at the picture, the stapes bone sits on the oval window, and we also see there is a round window below the oval window. So this is the stapes on the oval window, and right here, this point is the round window. So which way does the sound wave travel? Well, everything is shown by the pink arrows, and we will follow the pink arrows here. Now, the first sound waves enter the ear via the external auditory meatus or the ear canal, shown by the pink arrow. The sound waves hit the tympanic membrane as shown here, and as the sound waves hit the tympanic membrane starts to vibrate. In turn, the three ear ossicles, the malleus, incus, and stapes, they start to vibrate as well, and that amplifies the sound waves. The stapes also vibrates, obviously, and the stapes, it moves or vibrates against the oval window. As that happens, there are ripples caused in the perilymph of the scala vestibuli, and due to this disturbance in the scala vestibuli, we have bending of the cochlear duct. As there is mild tension in the or bending of the cochlear duct, that causes vibrations in the endolymph. So as the cochlear duct vibrates, that causes vibration in the endolymph, which is present inside the cochlear duct. Movement of the endolymph causes the basilar membrane, which is shown by the pink line here. So movement of the endolymph causes vibration of the basilar membrane, and as the basilar membrane vibrates, that causes the hair cells to hit the tectorial membrane, shown in orange here by the orange line. The hair cells hit the tectorial membrane and they bend. As the hair cells bend, so right here we see another representation. We see the vestibular membrane, we see the basilar membrane, and we also see the gel-like tectorial membrane. We do see the hair cells, and we also see the axons of the hair cells forming the cochlear nerve. And the whole thing is scala media or cochlear duct is the same thing. Scala media or cochlear duct, same thing. Alright, now the idea is as the basilar membrane vibrates, the hair cells vibrates, and the hair cells hit the tectorial membrane in orange and they bend. As the hair cells bend, that stimulates an electrical impulse in the form of action potential. So if I go back, So the hair cells bend and an action potential travels via the via the cochlear branch of cranial nerve 8 and this action potential then reaches the medulla oblongata. So let's see here. So on the left hand side you see the cochlea, right? That's the cochlea, and this branch that has the green arrow, that's the cochlear branch of the vestibulocochlear nerve or cochlear branch of cranial nerve 8. Cranial nerve 8 is called vestibulocochlear nerve. Okay, so from the cochlear branch of cranial nerve 8 carries the action potential to the medulla oblongata. So right here, that's the medulla oblongata. From the medulla oblongata, information travels to the inferior colliculi, which is here. And from the inferior colliculi, information goes to the thalamus, which is here. And from thalamus, the information ultimately reaches the primary auditory cortex in the temporal lobe, and we hear things. So let's review the pathway one more time. The entire pathway. So we will start with the pathway of the sound waves, and then we will look at the electrical pathway. Okay, so sound waves travel via the ear canal and hit the tympanic membrane. The tympanic membrane starts to vibrate, and in turn the ear ossicles in the middle ear starts vibrating. Vibration of the ear ossicles amplify the sound waves, and as the stapes vibrates against the oval window, there is undulation or disturbance in the perilymph of scala vestibuli. That causes a disturbance in the cochlear duct, and as the cochlear duct is disturbed, there is a wave or vibration in the endolymph within the cochlear duct. This causes the basilar membrane to vibrate, and as the basilar membrane vibrates, the hair cells hit the tectorial membrane and they bend. Bending of the hair cells against the tectorial membrane shoots out, causes stimulation of the nerve endings, and an action potential is carried by the cochlear branch of the cranial nerve 8, and the action potential then reaches the medulla oblongata of the brain. From medulla oblongata, the action potential goes to the inferior colliculi, and from inferior colliculi, the information goes to the thalamus. From thalamus, information is ultimately sent to the primary auditory cortex, which is associated with the process of hearing. That concludes my lecture on the ear. If you have any question, please feel free to reach out.